27th, 2025. Please join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can you do the roll call, please?
Councilwoman Clerk?
Here.
Councilman Collings?
Here.
Councilman Stackfleth?
Here.
Councilman Globman?
Here.
Mayor Redmond?
Here. All right, moving on to special presentation. There is none. Move on to public comment. Seeing nobody in the public to comment, we'll move on to council and staff comments, starting with Todd.
Okay, let me know if I'm filibustering too much, but okay. So I think I mentioned a while back that we agreed, if we could get it, to take unused Rule 20 funds from the county. And we were awarded about $2.67 million. That is to bury, infrastructure underground. And so we've got those credits, we've been awarded, and be coming back, we have to form what's called a public utility district and, pass a resolution, have a public hearing, and then there's a bunch of steps that we need to follow. Essentially, the district we're thinking of is part of the Lake Street reconstruction project. So when we've got that roadway open, instead of the overhead lines going back in place, they'll go underground. So, it's not a lot of money, but it helps. The old hospital demo started on the 20th. It's moving full steam ahead, and so we're really hopeful that we get this site deemed clean within the month, and that Bay Area receivership group can then start the RFP process looking for potential developers for the site. And I'll remind you that they aren't looking for the highest bidder. They're looking for the folks with the best qualifications and the best track record, and the folks that have the best product for that particular site. So I'm glad to see that started. It's been a real problem for people trying to sell their homes, and people are really worried about asbestos aerosolization up there. Okay, the daylighting of Castle Creek. What we've been waiting for is for Tom Hesseldins to cost out what the project, total amount for it. He's working on that. He's back on it. He had some other project that got him sidetracked, and he's got a list of grant sources that we should chase. We're thinking that we'll reconvene the ad hoc committee in early February, but that's coming. The library expansion, we seem to have mostly direction on that in terms of having the Berkeley architectural firm produce 100% design drawings to be turned over to us, where we would then go out with an RFP to find a general contractor with the mix of disciplines that we need to get this thing built. So they'll be producing that set. In the meantime, we've brushed off the old NEPA documents, and Nolan Tam is putting in the new footprint of that structure so we can submit. We've got pretty good NEPA documents, not much updating. That'll go in. We're seeking a categorical exclusion. It seems like we finally have some momentum on that one. Let's see. And, we're still continuing, it's a big project Jeff Mitchum's undertaking, and that is, working with various departments to look at costing out what it actually, time and materials takes to provide certain services to the city, so we can create a better master fee schedule, because right now we are not collecting anywhere near what we're putting out. So that'll be coming to council. and I'm sure there'll be a fair bit of consternation about it, but, ultimately, all we can do is charge what it costs us to pay for those services. And that's it for now.
Anybody else want to chime in on anything?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Todd, so regarding the library, so is Nolan Tam going to go through the motions of actually producing buildable plans, or are they
It's
just doing the general-
100% design drawings.
Right.
And you get to 100%, design drawings with Mylar. Then it gets turned over to GC, who then, produces full, construction drawings from other disciplines. Like if there happen to be a structural engineer that needs to be involved, or, there's going to be an HVAC.
Nolan Tam is shying away from doing that.
Is what?
It seems to me from the emails that they're shying away from doing that.
They
want to stop. They want to stop at the $120,000 to $130,000 to $180,000 level for the design drawings, but they don't want to do the full engineered plans, and that would be another $250,000 probably.
Well, so we have a quote for what it will take us to 100% design. And they said that it's another path and a bit of time, because they've got to put all the folks that do the costing for them, very specifically each item that they plan to, plan as part of that. And they would have to then build in the cost of the various, again, disciplines, but they would be at Berkeley rates. And the idea here, they believe, will be able to deliver on what the original intent of the Nolan Tam drawings are by getting a qualified GC. They would help us review the RFP when it comes in and who they're suggesting as subs, and we can plug them in at different phases of completion of those drawings, whether it's 30, 60, 90, to say, yeah, we're on track here or we're not. So, and that's going to be cheaper than having them do all of that at Berkeley rates. So I think we can get there.
So in other words, their detailed engineered plans would be far more expensive than what we hope to find up here from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Anybody else with anything? Seeing none, okay. Todd, you're up again with committee updates, if there are any.
I don't.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. City manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes for January 13th, 2025 special meeting. B, approval of minutes for the January 13, 2025 regular meeting. C, approval of disbursements, accounts payable 1/21/25, total gross payroll and taxes for periods ending 1/5/2025 and 1/19/2025. D, Chamber of Commerce funding, CCR 25-003 on that one. It's not written down on my notes. I'm trying to remember if that's 03 and 04 for D and E. Anyways, we'll get it to number. Oh, these are new, so this is going to be 5 and 6? That's correct. Okay. Okay, so you want to take one off or something? Okay. So anyways, yes, so sorry, D, Chamber of Commerce funding for CCR 25-05, E, acceptance of the Brownell parcels, CCR -25-06, and F, the monthly investment report. Does anybody want to take anything off before Jeffrey comments? No? Okay, Jeffrey?
Just some frame of reference here on the investment report includes what our sales tax revenue is, and we have the first 5 months of the year, and we had expected sales tax July through November to be $733,000, and it was down almost $90,000 just for 5 months. making about a $200,000 decrease in sales tax. And for the life of me, I could not figure out where this was coming from. If you look at TOT and some of the nuances of money that isn't in there that should be in there, we end up at pretty close to flat. And yet sales tax is down what's going to be is 12, 13-ish percent. How is this happening? And fortunately, one of the little weirdisms of going through our labor negotiations is that we found out from the person who's helping lead them that the sales tax that we used to get when people shop online from the city,
Yeah?
we don't get it anymore.
When did that change?
That changed about a year ago, and who gets it is instead of if somebody in our city orders something online,
Right.
and it say runs through Amazon and it's fulfilled down in Tracy and sent to us from Tracy, Tracy gets the sales tax, not us.
Really?
Yeah. Now, if it's out of state, then we get the sales tax. But it's the amount of shopping online that we used to get that we don't get. All of a sudden, that's a pretty big chunk of starting to understand how did sales tax drop 12, 13, 14%, somewhere in there, overnight, it appears. What the heck happened? And I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's new information for me, and that leads me to a large amount of, oh, wow, I did not know that. That starts to explain what's happening, and for what that's worth, they're working on a bill to try and change that till we split it with the fulfilling city, but that's still in the process of being worked out in the legislature.
Yeah, so I'll be bringing a letter of support for Cal Cities here coming up. As they've got their own lobbyist, and that small cities get together, write these letters, and make sure we make our pitch.
Good. Okay. Did you want to add to that? Or?
No, I want to make a
Make a
motion.
motion, cool.
I move to approve consent agenda items A through F by title only.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? None? 5-0. All right. Now moving on to number 8, the pension management policy. And Melissa Dodd has the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. We have online with us today Andrew Flynn from the Wiest Financial Group, or Law Group. And I believe this information has come to you in a presentation form previously, as well as we went over it a second time in audit committee about 4 months ago. So I'll just turn it over to Andrew, and he can go through the information again with you.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. So I'm Andrew Flynn. I'm actually with California Municipal Advisors. I am a registered municipal advisor. I have been working in the public finance sector for 25 years. I work on a whole range of topics, whether it's debt issuance or it's long-term capital planning. Obviously, pension is an area of heavy focus for me. It's an area that obviously a lot of public agencies across the state struggle with. And what we are bringing forward to you today is really the culmination of a lot of effort between myself, Cameron Wiest from Wiest Law, who's also on the Zoom today, and your staff who have been, and the Finance Committee who've been moving this topic forward. Really, the goal ultimately of this policy that we're putting forward to you today is to help the city develop a long-term framework within which you can begin thinking about mitigating your long-term liabilities. The easy way to think about pensions is that you have these liabilities that are generated, with your employees, right, over time. Again, you've made commitments to your employees to pay their benefits long into the future. CalPERS' job is to understand what those liabilities are, assess them as of today, and invest the dollars that you've set aside to fulfill those future obligations. What we know is that sometimes, whether it's poor assumptions, people live to be longer than we originally anticipated, or investment performance, the markets aren't doing as well as we would like. for a variety of reasons, unfunded liability is created. Now, unfunded liability is still the responsibility of the city to make up, because again, you have to fulfill your obligation to your employees. But CalPERS sets it up so that you can pay it back over time. Again, some of these swings can be pretty dramatic. So the goal is to mitigate this incrementally and pay it back over time, which is nice. Again, it's helpful. As you all know, you've been through the budget process. It takes time to pay some of these liabilities back, right? The swings can be pretty large at times. But the problem is that the way these structures are amortized out into the future, you can basically think of them as a whole set of mortgages that evolve over time, is that as long as those liabilities are outstanding, you're paying 6.8% interest on it, right? So that's very expensive obligations for the city. Now, again, there are different ways to approach mitigating your exposure to that. Some of them are large, some of them are small and incremental. And part of this process that we've been working through is talking about refinancing some of these obligations, paying off some of it, very quickly, and doing it through a lower interest rate, which is, one approach. But more importantly, once you do those types of big actions, what's most important is to have those incremental annual steps that you take to stay ahead of these liabilities. Now, there are a whole range of actions that can be taken. They're all part of the policy framework. But fundamentally, the policy's goal is, once council adopts it, or should council adopt it, I should say, it directs staff to every year review your pension liabilities, review the market, review the various things that could be considered as part of the budget process for the subsequent year, and bring recommendations forward to council given whatever the dynamics are in the market and in your pension policies at that time. So again, this isn't about it all happens and it all goes away at once. This is really about building a culture of discipline that says every year we look at our pension obligations, every year we think about how we can be proactive to mitigating our exposure to it. Because while the big moves can be very helpful, it's the small incremental moves over a long period of time that ultimately are going to drive your success. And that's what the policy is really trying to establish, is a framework within which you can do that. Now, there are some building blocks I want to kind of frame in for you just so that you understand a couple of the key pieces. First and foremost, the policy outlines a framework that says we're not trying to be at 100% funded all of the time. We're actually saying the policy says we want to be at 85%. Now, you would ask, well, why is that? Because again, 100% is your liability, and that's very true. But what we think about from a CalPERS perspective is that when you have lots of money with CalPERS, let's just say you're 95% funded and they have a really good investment year. Well, now you could conceptually be at 105%, which means you're super funded. And when you're super funded, again, that's great. You've got money with CalPERS and they're going to continue to invest it, but there's no way to get that money back. Right? And again, as you all live and breathe, the municipal budget process, right? Those dollars are precious. And if you can get them back, and if there are ways to mitigate, not being able to get those dollars, we want to take advantage of it because, again, you have plenty of other priorities to be focused on. So we focus on 85% as a funded target. That way, again, you're buffered from the swings, to the positive, but you're also not allowing the plans to go too low. Again, we're always going to be diligently working toward getting your plans to 85% with CalPERS. But then after that, you still want to be investing, but we're going to recommend that you invest in a 115 trust. Now, a 115 trust is an investment vehicle that's authorized by the IRS that's basically doing the same thing that CalPERS does. Again, you're putting dollars into the 115 trust. It is still dedicated to your pension obligations, but it allows you a little bit more flexibility. The way it works is when you put money into a 115 trust, it can actually go to two things. One, it can go to paying your unfunded liabilities, which is, again, the primary purpose of it, but it can also pay your normal contributions. Now, your normal contributions are those which you make in the current period for your current employees who are providing current services to your for your current taxpayers, right? Those are the payments that we want to generally be making every year. But if you get too much money, right, if you go above 100%, right, and you have excess dollars, and those are sitting in a 115 trust, you can actually bleed that excess off by paying your normal contributions. So again, it gives you mechanisms to get to those dollars when you get into a superfunded status. So again, it's about building these buffers to allow you to invest wisely, again, take advantage of mitigating your exposure to the 6.8%, right? Again, that's a good goal because again, anytime you borrow money, you're most likely, unless the markets are really wild, you're going to borrow money at a much lower rate because you're a tax exempt agency. But you know, we want to do that logically every year given whatever the context is. So again, reducing our exposure to 6.8 is great. The 115 trust is going to give you that buffer from having good years and bad years. It's kind of that reservoir that you can work with. But ultimately, it's about bringing this policy framework together on an annual basis so that council is informed, not just current council, but future council. Because again, these defined benefit programs aren't just, right now. These plans will be out here 30, 40, 50, 60 years into the future. So we want to build a framework that informs future staff, future council about these important processes so that they don't fall off the radar, right? Again, as we all know, right, there are always major issues that need to be focused on, especially when it comes to budget season. This is one of those things that oftentimes gets left aside. And we want to bring it forward, not to say it's the top priority, but that it has to be focused on as part of the annual budgeting process and consider recommendations. Again, current council can't dictate what future council does, but it can suggest that a good framework is in place so that that future staff has those mechanisms in place to make recommendations. Future council can decide to not do something, that's their prerogative, but at least you've established that framework that is incentivizing those small incremental moves that are reducing that exposure to that 6.8%. So that's a very high level. Again, the policy outlines all of the details, but that's really the kind of the key building blocks that I would want to leave you with. And I'm more than happy to answer questions on the policy or how it works. It's really at your discretion.
Thank you for that. Any clarifying questions to start with? Yes. Go right ahead.
Thank you for that. That was relatively straightforward. Just a couple of quick questions. And I missed your name. Would you say that one more time?
It's Andrew Flynn, F-L-Y-N-N.
Andrew Flynn. Andrew, I noticed most of us are familiar with mortgages.
Yep.
We know 15s and 20s and 30s, and some of us are familiar with municipal bonds, 3.5%, 4% tax-free municipal bonds. This is at 6.8% for a 20-year mortgage. Can you explain to us why, in effect, that interest rate is that high, given that we're a municipality and this is not covering assets? This is just, hey, we pay our employees, and this is just an augmented way to pay them. Is it a function of this 5-year ramp up? Can you explain how all that is tied together, if it is?
Of course, no, it's a fantastic question. So in essence, the 6.8% is determined by CalPERS. That is the long-term investment return that they anticipate on assets in these plans. So again, in a perfect world, when you put in your normal contribution this year, that should earn 6.8% every year out into the future. Again, whether they're investing it or whether you're contributing additional in the future, right? That 6.8% growth is what they are targeting to achieve that future contribution that the employees are earning. So think about it this way. If they increased that rate, your normal contribution today would be less, right? Because you're anticipating more growth into the future. But if they lower that rate, your contribution today would need to be higher because they assume a lower growth rate. So again, this 6.8% doesn't just apply to the unfunded liability. It applies to the total accrued liability that the city has with its employees, because that's that assumed growth rate that we're trying to achieve long term to pay the employees. Does that answer your question?
Partially. Let me ask one more to see if I can grab a hold of this in a different manner.
Of course.
We should be striving to be somewhere up around the 85% level from wherever we are, which is that 68 or 70%, wherever our city is at the moment.
Correct.
And that money equates to a total principal amount. And why wouldn't we just go out and get a 20-year municipal bond at 3.5% or 4% and fund this thing ourselves instead of going through CalPERS and spending 6.8%?
Well, okay, so there's a couple things to unpack there. First, you can't borrow tax exempt to pay pensions back. It's an IRS regulation. So if you borrow, you have to borrow.
I hate those, you know, they come at the most inopportune times.
Yeah, but it's still economically viable, right? Even though it's a taxable transaction, you can still go and borrow. Okay, so and it does generate savings. That is something that we will be bringing forward to council in the next several months. The finance committee has made that recommendation that we look at this further. So that's something that we will be bringing forward, but this policy is really kind of the core building block first. So again, you can borrow money and pay CalPERS, but that is only for existing unfunded liabilities. This is a rolling process. Again, this is the way I like to think of it is this is a rolling true-up. Again, you get new employees, you get new liability, they get new accrued benefits that develop over time. So this is a rolling true-up. So to a certain extent, you could go and say, we're going to pay it all off today, but then next year, right, again, CalPERS could have a great year and you contributed too much. Or conversely, they have a bad year and you have to contribute more again. So again, yes, you can think of it as a 20-year mortgage, but it's every year there is a 20-year layering effect, whether it's to the positive or to the negative. So again, you can't just say, hey, we pay this off and it goes away and we're done and we never think about it again. The only way that would ever happen is that if everybody went to a 401k or something similar to that structure, because it's that defined benefit that we are trying to proactively manage toward, that is always evolving. So again, we can't really say we're going to solve it and make it go away, but what we can do is mitigate the exposure, right, and reduce it and try to stay ahead of it, because that's where you're going to get the most benefit long term.
Thanks, Andrew. I think I get it. Thank you.
Happy to help.
Anybody else? All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Are you getting up? Okay. You know the drill?
Yes, Johanna Altorfer. I just did a quick Google on this, just to try to understand what this is all about. And it's talked about some of the negatives are limited employee control. Employees generally have minimal input on how their benefits are managed within a 115 trust, as the employer controls the trust and investment decisions. Potential for higher administrative costs, legal and accounting, versus other benefit plans. Investment risk. Poor investment choices can lead to insufficient funds. Uncertainty of benefit levels. Complexity in managing multiple trusts. Trustee fees, advisory fees, legal, auditing, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. I mean, it sounds, like a prudent thing to do to manage the pension fund, obviously, but, what are your comments regarding some of these items?
Sure, yeah, no, those are great questions. What's interesting is that 115 trusts managed in a silo very much can become a challenge, right? And that is really why we look at this as part of an overarching framework. Again, oftentimes what you will see is firms that are just trying to pitch 115 trusts. They say, this is better than. your current investment vehicle, which we discourage. Right? Again, that we don't want to get into a horse race because again, fees, all those types of factors, come into play. What we want to use the 115 trust for is mitigating our exposure to superfunding and creating that balancing factor. And what I'll just suggest is that when a 115 trust gets set up, the best thing to do is go out, research. There's 4 or 5 very good providers in the market. CalPERS being one of them. They actually have 115 trusts that are probably the lowest fees. There are fees because it is separately managed, so that's something that you do have to take into account. But again, when you weight this with going super funded or not having those balances available to mitigate your 6.8%, the risks are relatively de minimis so long as you work within a policy framework that is proactively helping understand how staff need to be thinking about its utilization, and it's not just a separate thing that is off to the side and no one's paying attention to.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I had one other little side comment or question, and that was like when you have investments, the managers usually get a fee. Are there fees that are going back to the investment advisor?
It depends on the firm that you go with. So again,
and if so, how much that is? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they will
because sometimes those are very steep.
Exactly. And that's why, again, you look at the various service providers to make sure that you're going with the most appropriate given your investment strategies. Again, as a general rule, CalPERS is a good example. They're going to give about 3 different portfolios. It's kind of low, medium, and high risk. So they keep those fees at a de minimis level. Again, recognizing that, again, the purpose isn't to necessarily go create a completely bespoke investment portfolio. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to basically mirror what CalPERS is doing, or maybe get a little bit riskier or a little bit less risky. But we want to be in that same range as what CalPERS does. That's not really where we're trying to. We're not trying to game the system and earn more money. Therefore, trying to pursue an investment advisor that's high fees is really not the right strategy that I would recommend.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanna. We'll close public comment, bring it back to council.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
Councilman Stackfleth and I have been in a couple of these meetings, so my overall takeaway is that we aren't saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z in this order in order to mitigate this. It's saying that we need help kind of getting the right balance of the 3 options. One is like a refinance of capital assets. One is the trust. One is paying more to avoid a bell curve. So I think it's important that we look at this annually to make sure we're not going to be hit with oh, by the way, you owe a huge amount and we don't have the budget for it. So from my point of view, they've done a lot of homework, and it looks to be what's best for us at this time.
Anybody, any other comments? We got a motion?
Yeah, no, I'll do that in a second. So the overall objective, as was hinted at there, is to secure a level of funding for our obligations without a spike in premium costs, basically, on a yearly basis. So we're looking at this as the best option at this point. It will hopefully, it's going to give us a policy, which is one of the things that the auditor recommended we have very strongly. I think maybe by law we have to have a policy regarding pension. I'm not sure about that, but recommended. And will, over the length of the program, save us money, but we have to like wait 15 years or something like that to see return. With respect to savings, it's just that we secure ourselves in the meantime from the risk of having big increases in pension costs. So that's what we have here.
Thank you. Yeah, anybody else?
If no one else has any discussion, I would make a motion to approve Resolution CCR-25-08, I believe, adopting a pension management policy.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None, 5-0. And now moving on to the second part of that with the audited financial statements of Mount Shasta and Mount Shasta Public Financing Authority. And Melissa Dodd has the floor again.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. As you're aware, we do a financial audit each year, and the auditor has completed with the financial audit and has produced the audited financial statements. So we're here to ask that you accept the report of the independent audit for fiscal year 23-24. Charlie was very helpful, and I appreciated that. Muriel also got a lot of the work done before she left, and that was much appreciated as well. The basics are, this is pretty much similar to the last year's report out, and on page 2, the city reports government assets and
recording stopped.
Accumulated depreciation of $13.7 million, which is down a little bit from prior year, as well as a net position of $4.8 million, which is with a difference in pension liability and long-term debt, and that is also down a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to read all this or just give you the highlights, so I'm kind of winging it, but and then we looked at the business type activities, and those are also down, but just very slightly. The second report of the statement of activities on page 6 reformats the revenues and expenditures, and the city expended about $8.5 million on government activities last year, and had grants of about $1.9 million, which was a bit down from the prior year, which was a little over $3 million. The city collected about $5.2 million in taxes, and the net position is down about $600,000. I think we've talked a little bit about that. These financial reports were reviewed in the audit committee as well, and Charlie went over them in a lot of detail. So if you have any other questions, happy to try to answer.
Go ahead. Anybody?
I was just going to have some comments.
Oh, we'll wait then. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead if you got a question. Yeah.
Hi, Melissa. Just can you just help me out a little bit here?
I could try.
In the beginning of the audit, there's 6 pages with 40-odd lines per page of audit adjustments, and that comes to a net total.
That's what I was going to comment about.
Oh, yeah, what does that mean?
I don't have to comment on that?
No.
You can comment on it if you want.
No.
What does that mean?
Okay, can you show me where we're at here?
Yeah, page starts at page 60.
Sorry about the numbers on 65.
Okay.
Well, it ends up on page 65.
Yeah. So these are the adjustments that the auditor found that were needed in order to get to the difference between what the numbers should have been based on his prior audit and the activities that should have been recorded in the system that didn't get done. Some of that was a little bit of Muriel departed a little bit early, so he didn't have some of the information that he would have expected to have. And then these are similar audit adjustments as to what had happened in the prior year. So him and I have worked out a corrective action plan on how to keep this from happening in the future. He's given me some good tools on how to report the lease activity in particular, and the long-term debt information. So we talked a lot about that. I've got some tools now in the files to work on that, and I'm hopeful that we won't have this again. One of the large pieces was the Axon, is the body cam equipment that we lease, but it's actually equipment, but we're also paying for a subscription. So there are a variety of ways that you can look at that. And I think they were still figuring that out. And this is kind of where he landed with how we're going to account for that going forward. Hopefully that kind of answered your questions.
No, yeah, because I'm looking at just the big chunk of, boy, somewhere around 200 different adjustments. I didn't know if that was average or small or large. It seemed like a lot to me versus what we thought it was, and I just thought I should ask.
Yeah, I will be posting these into our current financial system and going through a tie-out process. I'm sure I will run that by Charlie, and then I will now have record of these. So as they come along, my plan is to just do them at the time that they occur.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Seeing none, we will close public comment, bring it back to council. Anybody with a motion? Or sorry, you were going to sum up that up.
Yeah, just some comments. I think a big takeaway is that Charlie issued a clean opinion, which means it's free of material misstatement and fraud. So that's the biggest takeaway. The one finding is about the material audit adjustments. And I reached out to Melissa to make sure she was comfortable with hoping to eliminate that moving forward. And it's not unusual for cities within Siskiyou County to have that finding. It's pretty normal. It's just making sure that the understanding's there. So I had one other point, but now it's left me. Yeah, it's gone. But yeah, I think the timing of the audit is amazing. We're usually like another 6 months behind, so that was really nice to see.
Last year was June.
Yeah. So if I think of it, I'll come back.
Okay, so my comments are that Charlie was pretty clear as to what the problems were this year, and they did seem less dramatic, for sure. But there were all these adjustments, so nothing more need be said. Mira doesn't work here anymore, and hopefully she's enjoying her retirement. The other thing that wasn't really listed here by Charlie was recommendations regarding policies, such as having a policy regarding pension, which we just voted on. He, in the past, and it was like a yearly thing, would mention that our processes regarding how we account for leases is not correct, or is not current with the most recent standards. All these things have ways you're supposed to proceed, and that's not mentioned here. So I don't know if that means we're up to date on that, or you just didn't want to mention it again. Regarding leases, paid time off, and what was another one that he always harped on was paid time off, leases, pension.
They should be accrued.
Right, the way it's accrued and so forth on the balance sheet more than anything.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if we're up to date on our policies or not, or he just was thinking the way I was thinking, is that Springbrook would have make sure that all of our modules going forward would be helping us to account for things with the most recent regulations. And disappointingly, Springbrook is way behind on delivering its modules, way behind. How many do we have as of now?
Well, we're just using the financial system. We are on hold a little bit for licensing and permitting, and we're in the about the middle of implementing payroll. We're hope to go live with payroll in beginning of April.
If you may recall, we approved a payment to them of approximately $147,000, from what I remember, for a whole package of modules. That was over a year ago, I think, and we're far from complete on that. So
So we do have a implementation schedule. The last module, licensing, permitting, we're going from a manual process to a computerized process, and so I think it ended up being a little more complicated than we expected. Jody's done a fabulous job with trying to keep that moving along. We didn't have a schedule until about a month or so ago. I pressed them and pressed them and pressed them to get a schedule put together. So we have the payroll will be at the moment, and we have a very, very good implementer for that one, going live beginning of April. We're doing the purchase order implementation next month. We will be doing the accounts receivable in May. We're hoping to do business licensing by July, because the business licenses go out again at that point. And utility billing is scheduled currently for the end of August. With such small staff, these modules do take a little bit of time, especially when you come across a hiccup that you weren't expecting. So we're hopeful that we can stay on track with that. There's one more module that they need to get us scheduled for. But that's kind of where we're at. Back in February, we did pay for the subscription, and then we didn't actually pay anything else until we started to do the implementation, which was around July. And then we've been receiving bills from them since then as we're implementing the modules. I did push back a little bit with them since we didn't get to use the modules that we had paid for. So they are giving us about a $6,500 credit towards that. And it will be nice once we get them all online, because they will all be interconnected, so these accruals and things will happen automatically in the system. The payroll processing we do right now is very manual, so we're making a lot of progress on that, so that will help as well. But to answer the question on policy, I do believe we do still need to get a couple policies put in place, budgeting being one of them, for sure.
All right, so this is almost an academic affair. If we don't accept this audit, what is the other choice? We'll go out and pay for another audit. So in general, the audit was, shall we say, better than last year's. It was more timely, and there seems to be far less things.
I remembered my thing, if I can interject before you make a motion.
Oh, good.
Okay. Go ahead.
One thing that isn't a recommendation, but just a consideration, is what's called an MD&A, management discussion and analysis, which is kind of the city's ability to tell the story of the year, which hasn't been done in the past. I know Retta Hogan of the city of Wairika used to put together a really great one, and it can say why sales tax went down. You can say it's because Amazon doesn't do its thing anymore. You can say we hired 2 new police officers, kind of just having that ability to share our achievements as well. So it's not just financial data, but it can tell the story, and it's not audited. So it can be in you can have graphics and all that. So that was all.
Thank you.
All right, so without further discussion, I'll move to approve Resolution CCR-25-08. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta accepting the independent audit reports and single audit for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. 5-0. All right, moving on to reports on outside meetings. Does anybody have anything? See anything? Nobody but Kelly? You didn't talk to Kelly or anything?
We have one next week. Yeah. Or we have our thing on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, we do have an upcoming meeting with the county and SORA to talk about Everett Memorial Highway, see if we can figure out a way that we can get creative and
Is that this week? What? February 12th.
12th. Yeah, to see if we can offset those costs somehow.
Nothing else? All right.
TOT.
Just to report on it, you mean? Yeah.
Is there something else?
I could. I mean, it's not really about outside meetings. I don't know if we're able to comment on it. Just about the Loge, and yeah, they, as many know, they haven't paid their TOT since June, and we've reported the delinquency a number of times. We've gotten emails back where they acknowledge that they owe the money, and still it's been crickets. Drafted a letter that John Kenny sent out to them, and they passed that deadline. John Kenny alerted the DA's office. The DA's office investigator called us the next day. They're taking it seriously and they're looking into it. In the meantime, Kenny and Noreen has a new associate attorney who's filed a civil suit on our behalf, and we've got some other things that we're looking at, potentially appointing a receiver to take some of their assets if we need to cover that those back taxes, because ultimately they've got all hoteliers have a fiduciary responsibility to take what TOT that guests pay and hold it to pass to the city. So it's essentially the theft of government funds.
Just, we shouldn't probably be developing this, but when's their business license up?
I believe it's June.
Yeah, all business licenses are coming.
Yeah, so
And we had a closed session on the potential for holding a hearing at City Council, letting a representative from the Loge know that they can come and defend themselves. But that's the process whereby we revoke their business license.
Joy. All right. Anybody else? No? All right. Moving on to future agenda items and meetings. Does anybody want to add anything before I do the reading? I'm not seeing anything. All right.
Yeah, I mean, right sizing of the master list of fees for cost recovery for everything from building inspection, planning fees, some police fees, fire inspections, that kind of thing. And we've been gathering a lot of information in-house. And so when it's ready for prime time, we'll make sure that we hold a public hearing and bring it here.
Cool. All right, so coming up on future agenda items, we have the first reading of an ordinance pertaining to snow removal in the downtown on February 10th. Military equipment annual report on February 10th. Condemnation of chestnut parcels, TBD, beautification.
Correct. Yes, correct.
Oh, that's already done.
We can pull that one.
Yeah, sorry. Gotcha. All right, sorry. Woohoo! The Beautification Committee presentation to council, TBD, survey of Washington Avenue, TBD, and discussion and possible action of rental, lease, or purchase of lot located at the northwest corner of Alma and Mount Shasta Boulevard, TBD. For the next meeting, Jeffrey, are you going to be here to run it? I will be in Reno doing it. I will be sitting next to a slot machine for the meeting. You're in San Francisco? Can I run the meeting from a slot machine in Reno as long as we post it?
Oh.
Uh-oh.
I get to make the game, is what I'm hearing.
Okay. But do we? So it's just going to be three of us? Because I'm
But
just kidding.
You won't be here?
For those of you watching who can't take a joke, I will be sitting in my hotel room. Anyways. So are we able to do it then
I'll
with
be
me
here.
at least being in the hotel room and then you can run the meeting? Okay. Or I can run it from the hotel room. What's the legalities on this?
The attorney was going to get back to me with some additional comments regarding that.
Okay. Cool. Okay. No, I know. I'll figure out where my room is ahead of time.
You have to post the meeting
Or I'll
on
just
a
mention
slot
what slot
machine.
machine I'm sitting next to. There's a couple that pay really well. So he'll kick it into CalPERS. So all right, on that note, this meeting is adjourned. See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.